Hi guys, welcome to the video tute on skill building. This particular video tutorial is focusing on developing your ability to associate particular keywords to the content areas from the syllabus document. Now, obviously you haven't studied any of this content, and that's the idea. The focus of this is not what you know about the content, but whether or not you can pick up keywords in a given question and relate them to a particular syllabus dot point. So let's get started. To begin, let's just revise the HSC examination paper in terms of its layout. As you know from sitting your prelim exams, the HSC paper will be made up of 3 sections. The first section consists of 10 multiple choice questions and 1 short answer question, usually worth about 5 marks. The total mark allocation for section 1 is 15 marks. Now, all the questions within section 1 are concerned with the first unit of study within the HSC course. This is Religion and Belief Systems in Australia post-1945. Under that comes Aboriginal spirituality and religious adherence in the Australian landscape. Within section 2, you'll be presented with 5 questions and you need to pick one of them. In our study, we'll be focusing on Christianity or Islam, so you can disregard the other questions for the other religious traditions. For this reason, the section 2 is concerned with content from your second and third unit, which are religious tradition in-depth studies. It is made up of 3 short answer questions of varying marks, and it is equivalent to a total of 15 marks. Following this is section 3, where you, again, like section 2, select 1 question from questions 1 to 5. Section 3 is an extended response question. Like section 2, you need to pick either Christianity or Islam. Again, disregard the other religious traditions because we have not studied them. You do, however, need to remember that if you chose Islam for section 2, you must do Christianity for section 3, and vice versa. You cannot complete written responses on the same tradition for both section 2 and section 3. Section 3, because it's an extended response question, is worth a total of 20 marks. One of the most difficult things in the exam is working out what the question's actually asking you to do, and these are skills that are necessary for you to develop over the course of the year. So this particular video tutorial will focus predominantly on developing your ability to break down the questions in order to identify the key words and components that are evident within them. So let's have a look at an example of how we can do this. Okay, so when you're learning how to break down a question and figure out what it's actually asking you to do, you may use the following steps as a guide. Firstly, you want to identify the verb or the glossary term. Now, this is important because it tells you exactly what the question is asking you to do and to say. So when your teachers tell you to make friends with the glossary terms on the Board of Studies website, they're not kidding, all right? Have this as a favourite and refer to it consistently. You need to know what each of these glossary terms mean so you can answer the question accurately in an exam. The second step that you can do is to identify the content area being addressed. So in terms of studies of religion, you'll be looking at the different units of study. So firstly, is the question concerned with our first unit, which is religious and belief systems in Australia post-1945? Or is it concerned with our Christianity in-depth study or our Islam in-depth study? In a way, in the HSC exam for studies of religion, you already know that section 1 is concerned with the first unit, and section 2 and 3 are concerned with our religious in-depth studies. However, the step 3 of this particular process is where you need to identify the specific area of content. Okay, so that's actually asking you to look at, well, what area within religious and belief systems in Australia post-1945 are they concerned with? What area within our religious in-depth study of Islam are they asking you to focus on? So, for example, the religious and belief systems in Australia post 1945 unit is broken up into particular categories. So, within the Aboriginal spirituality component of this unit, there is a focus on the dreaming, dispossession, and land rights. And because I'm a little bit of a goose and got ahead of myself, I forgot to put the other components in, which is concerned with religious expression in Australia, which is the second part of the first unit, and that's broken up into changing patterns of religious adherence, the current religious landscape in Australia, ecumenical movements, interfaith dialogue, and reconciliation. So when you're looking at section 1, you'll be looking at the multiple choice questions provided as well as question 11 and attempting to identify which particular syllabus dot point is hit by that question, and they can come under those categories. Christianity and Islam, on the other hand, have 3 areas of content within them. They are significant person, ethics, and practice. So the benefit of identifying these specific areas of content is that it allows you to recognize the limitations of the question. So, for example, in section 2, if you are asked to focus on the significant practice within Islam, then you know that you don't really need to mention significant person or ethics, right? And same goes for any other question. It just limits the scope so that you avoid including irrelevant information and time wasting, essentially. Alright, so sometimes you will get questions that don't actually include a verb or glossary term. In these cases, you need to read the question carefully and take into account the context of the question. Right? If you do this, you'll be able to substitute the given words with a verb. So, for example, you might be presented with the word how, and this could translate into explain, especially if the context of the question is looking at cause and effect or the relationship between different components. If you're given the term how well, it requires you to make a judgment, and for this reason you might substitute it with the glossary term evaluate. So that's another skill that you might want to practice in both RE and other subjects, where you play an association game with the words that you're being given. Alright, so let's have a look at some examples from some past papers and break down the questions in order to give you a bit of a guide for your activity. It'd be a good idea for you to get your syllabus dot points that you printed off last lesson out and have them in front of you so you know what I'm talking about. So this question is an example of a multiple choice question which has been taken from section 1, the 2012 HSC paper. And it asks you, which church can be considered to have been formed as a consequence of the ecumenical movement in Australia? A. Congregational, B. Presbyterian, C. Anglican, or D. Uniting. Now, it's really important that you don't look at this question and say, I don't know the content. Of course you don't. You haven't learnt it yet. The point of it, however, is for you to read the question and try and identify key words so that you can pinpoint it to a particular syllabus dot point. So for this particular question, we can see that the ecumenical movement. This is from the first unit of religious and belief systems in Australia. Can't spell. Good. Post 1945. More specifically, it comes under the religious expression component of that particular unit, and the syllabus dot point that's being identified is the third dot point, which is describe the impact of Christian ecumenical movements in Australia. Okay, so that's all you would need to do for the multiple choice. All right, again, you're not attempting to answer it, you are just attempting to identify the syllabus dot point that's being addressed. Okay, so here's another example of a multiple choice question. The The traditional role of initiation ceremonies in Aboriginal spirituality has been to prepare young people, A, for the effects of dispossession, B, for their struggle for land rights, C, to undertake adult responsibilities, or D, to develop a relationship with the religious traditions. Okay, so the key words presented within this are Aboriginal spirituality, because this tells us that it comes from, again, the first unit, which is religious and belief systems in Australia post 1945. We also know that it's coming from the first component of the course, which is concerned with contemporary Aboriginal spirituality. Okay, but we're also given a couple of other key words here that will allow us to better pinpoint the syllabus dot point that's being addressed, and that is found in initiation ceremonies. And this connects to the first syllabus dot point of Aboriginal spirituality, subcategory ceremonial life. Alright, so that's a couple of examples on how you can break down multiple choice questions and connect them to particular syllabus dot points. So the following is a sample of a question 11, so this is still contained within section 1 of the exam. How have religious traditions in Australia given support to the process of Aboriginal reconciliation? Now, the key word within this particular question is reconciliation, okay? So we've already identified that comes under the first unit of study, which is religious, can't spell again, good work me, religious and belief systems in Australia post 1945. Okay, now as far as the syllabus dot point is concerned, we're looking for where reconciliation comes out. Alright, and it actually is hit under the second component of study, which is religious expression in Australia, 1945 to the present, and it's actually comes under the last dot point, which is religious dialogue in multi-faith Australia, subcategory 3, the relationship between Aboriginal spiritualities and religious traditions in the process of reconciliation. Boom. Alright, so this is an example of a section 2 style question. As you can see, in section 2 you get to choose your question and therefore the particular religion that you want to focus on. This particular question is focusing on Christianity. So that's a little bit obvious. So what's left to you now is just to focus on the specific area of content that's presented within each question. So for question A, briefly outline 2 Christian ethical teachings in one of the following areas: bioethics, environmental ethics, and sexual ethics. So as you read through that question, hopefully you picked up on the ethical teachings as being the key terms within the question, and therefore a connection to ethics. All right. Now in the syllabus dot point, there is only one that focuses on ethics. It asks you to describe and explain Christian ethical teachings on bioethics or environmental ethics or sexual ethics. Fun fact, everyone, we're going to study bioethics. A2, how does one ethical teaching outlined in Part A influence the lives of adherents? Now, it's a connecting question, and again, hits ethical teachings for this reason. So again, we hit the ethic syllabus dot point. All right. Question A1 and 2 usually are connecting questions and often focus on the same content area and syllabus dot point. Not in all cases though. Question 2b, analyse the significance for the individual of one significant practice drawn from the following: baptism, marriage ceremony, and Saturday, Sunday worship. Hopefully you picked up practice as being the key word and therefore linking to the focus area of significant practice in the life of adherents, which is the third component of our in-depth study. And fun fact, everyone, we are going to study baptism. All right, moving on to section 3 style questions. Like section 2, you pick the particular religion that you wish to focus on. So the area of content is identified for you as being Islam. All right, the question, this one includes a quote: men, women and school of thought have reformed and or revitalized the Islamic tradition. How well does this statement reflect the impact on Islam of one significant person or school of thought other than Muhammad and the 4 rightly guided caliphs? Okay, now this one being an essay question, it's more important that you break down and acknowledge the glossary term, the specific area of content, and the limitations. All right, now as I said previously, you've been given how well, and if we substitute that for a glossary term, then you're looking at something like evaluate, because you're attempting to make a judgment. All right. Furthermore, the key words that pinpoint the specific area of content in this question is significant person. Hold on. Significant person or school of thought. Okay. Now, in Islam, we, fun fact everyone, are going to deal with Sayyid Qutb, which you don't necessarily need to know at this point, but, you know, why not? All right. Limitations are also highlighted in this question because it tells you that you're not allowed to talk about Muhammad or the four rightly guided caliphs. Right. So those two were content areas within the prelim, but they're just reinforcing that you're not allowed to talk about those. You have to talk about the significant person that you studied. All right. All right. So in section 3, there has been in the past times where students have received questions that doesn't explicitly identify the specific area of content. What this means is that it doesn't tell you in the question to refer to a significant person or school of thought, or it doesn't tell you to refer to a significant practice or the ethical teachings. Okay, so in the absence of this identification of specific areas of content, it's usually an indication that you need to refer to all 3 of the areas within the religious in-depth study. All right, and we can call these combination questions. All right, so unless you're told otherwise, for example, to refer to 2, then you'll need to refer to all 3 areas. Now, example of this is below. With question 2, we can identify the content areas being Christianity, because again, you're given this. All right, and the question says, some religions emphasize justice while others emphasize compassion. It's that nice little quote for you. You will get quotes sometimes. You need to know how to break these down on a side note. Anyway, back to the activity at hand. How does the statement reflect the diversity of expression within the Christian tradition? Okay, so you have no verb, you've got how does. Because you're looking at the relationship between diversity of expression and Christian tradition, you could probably use this as an explain or because it's a little bit higher order and it is an extended response, it may even be analysed, because analyse means to identify the components and the relationship within them. All right. As far as identifying the specific area of content, though, we can see that all we're given is Christian tradition. Okay, we're not told specifically which area of content to focus on. For this reason, you're going to address all three of person, ethics, and practice. Alright, so that's just a little trick of the trade, and you'll learn more about this as we go through the course. Okay, so they're just a few examples of questions and how you can identify the key words within a question and link them to the syllabus dot point. The idea behind this is if you can do that now, as we go through the course, when you're given a specific question, you can pinpoint it to the syllabus and therefore pinpoint it to the content that you've learnt relating to that syllabus dot point. All right. Bear in mind, again, we're not expecting you at this stage to know the content. You haven't learnt it yet, and that's fine. What we are expecting is you to attempt to associate key words to the syllabus dot points. All right. In order to do this, what you'll need to do is have your syllabus dot points in front of you, which you should already have because I asked you for them about 5 minutes ago. Keep those in front of you and download and print the 2013 HSC paper, which has been attached with this post. All right. For every single question in that paper, you need to identify the verb or substitute the words given. Okay, these are predominantly in section 2 and section 3, as well as question 11. All right, not so much the multiple choice. Identify the content area, so the particular unit of study, and then the specific area of content, so the dot point within each of those units. All right, now a reminder, because you're only going to study Christianity and Islam, you only have to do the Christianity and Islam questions. Okay, but do both of them for section 2 and section 3. And this is where I leave you, so good luck, and I'll see you next time.